Killer bees or honeybees? Is Saul a killer bee? What about Jonathan? What type of bee is he? Is he a worker for Yahuah? Is he committed? Did Yahuah bless Jonathan, or was the honey a curse? This is Yahuah's end time message from 1 Samuel 14, and it is from Yah's covenant calendar. The date is about 1087 BC, or about 365 years after Moses. What does this story have to do with honeybees? Why another dawn day study? I thought we already had some. The truth of the dawn day commencement was lost a long time ago, about the time the exiles returned from Babylon, changing it to the sunset or the evening commencement. Rome made changes to midnight. History books speak of day commencements as being at 6 p.m. every day. Over recent years, some claim Yahuah's day begins at sunrise or at noon. In the last 10 years, this truth is being restored according to creation and Torah, so you can experience the sweetness of dawn every single day of the week. And yes, once you start experiencing dawn to dawn, it is sweet. It is a very huge advantage in your life. Great improvement. Yahuah provided a beehive of chai, and that word chai is the Hebrew word for life. And what do we read about this honey? What did it do when Jonathan tasted it? Let's read 1 Samuel 14:27. It says there, and his eyes lit up. He was rejuvenated with his energy. Would Jonathan lose his life violently, a result of hunger and innocently eating honey? Could this hunger and honey factor be a catalyst for exposing the dawn start to the cycles of 7 in Yahuah's kingdom? Just getting started here. These studies try to refrain from using the word day that has been translated from the original Hebrew word yom. The word day loses a massive amount of definitive correctness in its ambiguous definitions. Day can indicate 12 or 24 hours, day or night, or both. To understand scripture correctly, we need to be much more accurate. Preference is given to the word cycle in the place of day. When quoting the scriptures or citing the Shabbat day, you will see it. Otherwise, cycle is the word of choice. The 24-hour cycle will be defined below to pinpoint the 2 seasons. Number 1, cycle. 24 hours containing the 2 seasons. One will be light, and that is or, and one season will be night, and that will be leil. Number 2, season. That word is it, and that will be 12-hour blocks of time, whether it is the light season or the night season. A very important application example of season is found in Yirmiyahu 33:20-25, and there you will read about the covenant of the light season and the covenant of the night season. Very important. I want you to notice the commitment of this honeybee. It is all in. It dives in head first, in full commitment. Is there a lesson here? Should we be judging our life or conducting our life in the same manner? Should we be all in? What does Luke 10:27 have to say? And he, answering, said, you shall love Yahuah your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. How much does all include? Does it exclude anything? Shouldn't that be our full commitment? How about Joshua 22:5? What does it say there? Only diligently guard to do the command and Torah, which Moshe the servant of Yahuah commanded you, to love Yahuah your Elohim, and to walk in how much? All his ways. That word ways is goes right back to his cyclical feasts, to walk in all his ways and to guard his commands and to cling to him and to serve him with all your heart and with all your being. Full commitment, just like that bee, full commitment. What level of commitment do we see from Jonathan in this selection of scripture? One cycle of Jonathan's life begins, and I want you to notice this, the premier witness of this study, 1 Samuel 14:1. And it came to be one day, not 2 days, and it came to be one day that Jonathan, son of Saul, said to the young man who bore his armor, "Come, let us go over to the outpost of the Philistines, which is on the other side." But he did not inform his father. What reason did inspiration have to document the words, "and it came to be one day"? Why does not scripture just declare, "and it came to be"? Is this phrase purposely declaring the length of time in detailing this honey event? And just to be upfront, the Hebrew warriors saved Jonathan's life after he ate honey. So we know that right away. But what is the details about dawn to dawn? What is it going to show? The Hebrew declares Yom. Yom is 1/7 of the week and is not plural, as in multiple cycles, but is singular, as in 1 24-hour period. Again, when does it begin? We are not told here. We will have to wait until the end of the story when the Hebrew warriors saved Jonathan's life. And yes, they will tell us clearly when it starts. The warriors will make it clear beyond any shadow of doubt. 1 Samuel 14:6. And Jonathan said to the young man who bore his armor, "Come, let us go over to the outpost of these uncircumcised. If so be, Yahuah does work for us, for there is no hindrance for Yahuah to save by many or by few." Jonathan's honeybee armor bearer, 1 Samuel 14:7. And his armor bearer said to him, "Do all that is in your heart, incline yourself. See, I am with you, according to your heart." His armor bearer is a picture of that bee. His armor bearer was fully committed. He says, "I am with you." There's no question there. Let's get it done. Jonathan's armor bearer had full trust in Jonathan's leadership and his faith in Yahuah. The armor bearer, like the honeybee, was all in without reserve. He too was fully committed to the purpose of routing the evil from destroying Israel. Maybe we also should be the bee. Fully committed. That's what we need to be. Jonathan was dependent upon Yahuah, 1 Samuel 14:8. And Jonathan said, "See, we are passing over to the men and show ourselves to them." Verse 9, "If they say this to us, 'Wait until we come to you,' then we shall stand still in our place and not go up to them." But this is under the guidance from Yahuah. Verse 10, "But if they say this, 'Come up to us,' then we shall go up, for Yahuah has given them into our hand, and this is the sign to us." And both of them disclosed themselves to the outpost of the Philistines. And the Philistines said, "See, the Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they have hidden." Have you noted that Jonathan's relationship with Yahuah was vertical? Jonathan did not depend on the physical presence of the Ark of the Covenant for his empowerment from Yahuah. He knew Yahuah was with him. Yahuah gave consent to Jonathan to exterminate the Philistines. Please note the beginning of this war, 1 Samuel 14:12. And the men of the outpost called to Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, "Come up to us and let us teach you a lesson." Then Jonathan said to his armor bearer, "Come up after me, for Yahuah has given them into the hand of Yisrael." And Jonathan climbed up on his hands and his knees with his armor bearer after them. And they fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer was putting them to death behind him. And that first slaughter, which Jonathan and his armor bearer made, was about 20 men in about half an acre of land. Did you note that? Jonathan was taking them out by the power of Yahuah, and his armor bearer was completing the mission behind them. Teamwork for Yahuah. 2 men of faith against 20 in the space of about half an acre. It becomes quite clear that Yahuah was directly working with Jonathan and his armor bearer. Big question here. Can the same be said for Saul? 1 Samuel 14:15. And there was trembling in the camp, in the field, and among all the people. The outpost and the raiders also trembled, and the ground shook, and it became a trembling of Elohim. And the watchman of Saul in Gibeah of Benjamin looked and saw the crowd melting away, and they went here and there. In verse 16, we read the Philistines and their cohorts were brought into confusion. In verse 17, after Paul had inquired if anyone was missing, he realized that Jonathan and his armor bearer were not present. First Samuel 14:18. This is confirmation number 2. Yom, a singular cycle in this battle. If we read it here, then Saul said to Ahiah, "Bring close the ephod," for he wore the ephod when? On that day, confirmation number 2 of a singular day. On that day before the sons of Yisrael. Here is the Hebrew letters. It is Beom. The B or the Beit tells us it is within, and the Yom is the 24-hour period. One 24-hour period, not 2 days. Confirmation number 2. In the next few verses, we learn that Saul withdrew his request from the priest for communication from Yahuah. The reason was too much noise distraction in the Philistine camp. Had Yahuah wanted to communicate with Saul, would the commotion have prevented it? Was Saul mentally prepared to communicate with Yahuah? We also learn that the Hebrew warriors who happened to come for the battle alongside the Philistines turned their faces to join with their brothers of Yisrael. Even the Hebrews who had hid in the mountains of Ephraim joined in the fray of the battle. Note the chronology here. The next verse concludes the general outline of this important battle. After that, next comes the details that occurred within the 24-hour battle time frame. 1 Samuel 14:23. Thus Yahuah saved Yisrael that day, and the battle passed over to Beth Awen. Again, this is confirmation number 3. That word Yom is there, a singular cycle. Thus Yahuah saved Yisrael that day. Singular, not 2 days, as sunset theory would have us believe. And here's the details over here. You can look at the words in Hebrew yourself and come to your own conclusion. This next verse provides the contextual foundation for this study. Please note the time frame recorded and the oath taken by Saul and the time frame within that oath. Note the immense blunder on Saul's part. Yahuah empowered Jonathan to the great initial victory. What effect will Saul's massively foolish oath have on the Hebrew warriors? What power is revealed to be working inside Saul's mind? This is the verse that is the basis of this study. The contextual foundation for this study is the oath taken by Saul, which impaired the warriors' full ability to defend Israel. Note the end time of the oath, which is evening. That is the twilight mixture after the sunset. 1 Samuel 14:24. And the men of Israel were distressed when? That day. For Saul had placed the people under oath, saying, Cursed be the man who eats food. When? Until evening. That is the limit, the time limit. That is the evening mixture after the sunset. Cursed be the man who eats food until evening, and I have taken revenge on my enemies. Interesting. I have taken revenge on my enemies. What about Yahuah? Did he leave Yahuah out of that? Therefore, none of the people tasted food. Remember, these are warriors fighting a battle, and they could not eat. So let's put it onto a chart here so we can see. Jonathan and the bee, that's commitment of his armor bearer, they slew about 20 men. And this is in the early portion of the light season. This is the light season of the war, and it is here somewhere that Saul said, do not eat food until when? Until after the sunset in the evening mixture. Do not eat food. The Hebrew nation had united and routed the Philistines. We see that in 1 Samuel 14:20-22. And it says in verse 23, thus Yahuah saved Israel that day. Interesting, it does not say Saul saved Israel. It says Yahuah saved Israel that day. 1 Samuel 14:24, the next verse then tells us, and the men of Israel were distressed that day, for Saul had placed the people under oath, saying, Cursed be the man who eats food until evening, and I have taken revenge on my enemies. Therefore, none of the people tasted food. Saul, erroneously thinking he had some positive power of his own, wanted to place his own influence on the battle. The question is, did Saul's oath empower or debilitate the Hebrew warriors? Ultimately then, who actually saved Yisrael? 1 Samuel 14:24. And the men of Yisrael were distressed that day, for Saul had placed the people under oath, saying, Cursed be the man who eats food until evening. Right here, the evening mixture once again. The evening twilight mixture arrives after the sun has set. The Hebrew warriors were expending massive amounts of energy defending the nation. They, not being allowed to eat food on account of death, were extremely hungry. Again, did Saul's oath empower them or debilitate them? Jonathan is going to tell us more on that question. Ultimately, to which authority was Saul submitting? What innocent action did Jonathan take on? 1 Samuel 14:25. And all they of the land came into the woods, and there was honey on the ground. Did you notice the honey dripping at the top of your screen? 1 Samuel 14:26. And the people came into the woods and saw the honey dripping, but no one put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard that his father had taken an oath of the people, and he stretched out the end of the rod that was in his hand and dipped it in the honeycomb, and put his hand to his mouth, and his eyes lit up. He was rejuvenated, instant energy from the honey. Do you think Yahuah had that in mind? Yahuah had ensured the warriors had access to near instant energy by supplying honey available to all. Jonathan, not knowing of his father Saul's oath, ate some rejuvenating honey. It was before the sunset occurred, and he had no idea of the consequences per Saul's oath. Jonathan's energy was quickly and innocently restored with the natural sugars in the honey. Is it possible that Yahuah had arranged this vital need beforehand? Would Yahuah know the needs of the warriors? 1 Samuel 14:28. Then one of the people said, your father strictly took an oath of the people, saying, cursed be the man who eats food today. And the people were weary. And Jonathan said, my father has troubled the land. Now see how my eyes lit up when I tasted a little of this honey? How much better if the people had well eaten today of the spoil of their enemies which they had found. For then would not the slaughter among the Philistines have been greater? And they smote the Philistines when? That day from Michmash to Ayalon. So the people were very weary. And the people pounced on the spoil and took the sheep and the cattle and calves and slaughtered them on the ground. And the people ate with the blood. They were warriors putting out extreme energy. They were ravishing hungry. They were not allowed to eat because of the oath of Saul. And they told Saul, saying, look, the people are sinning against Yahuah by eating with blood. And he said, you have acted treacherously. Roll a large stone to me today. So we must give credit where it is due. At least Saul had the presence of mind to stop the reckless slaughter with the eating of blood. He did do that. We must give him credit for that. This power that held Saul under such strong influence was the force that seriously reduced the energy and effectiveness of the Hebrew warriors. Was this same power that caused Saul to seek out the witch of Endor? Was this a habitual pattern from Saul? Ultimately, who was responsible for the sins of the Hebrew warriors eating the meat with blood? Yes, each individual warrior was responsible. However, there was one who was much more responsible for his whole army. Was it Saul who readily accepted the influence of pride? And have we passed over an important calendar detail? What have we just read over? Let's look at it. 1 Samuel 14:31. And they smote the Philistines that day from Michmash to Ayalon. So the people were very weary. Yes, again, another confirmation. Yom, a singular cycle in this battle. Here it is. They smoked the Philistines that day. If we look on the right, over here, Beyom, in that day, or in the day, however you like. Yom, singular. Please note the word yom. It's a singular, not a plural. It does not have the second M or second mem after the word. If you look over here, this M or the mem, the prefix mem is not there on the right-hand side. It only has one mem. It is not plural. Again, confirmation number 4, a singular cycle. At this point, we still have not been informed of a specific change in time pertaining to the events. What corrective action did Saul undertake to stop the people from sinning by the eating of blood? Will there be more witnesses to the sunset not changing the cycle of the week? Samuel 14:34. And Shaul said, scatter among the people and say to them, each one bring his ox near to me, and each one his sheep, and you shall slaughter them here and eat. And do not sin against Yahuah by eating with the blood. So every one of the people brought his ox with him that night and slaughtered it here. Please note the emphasis on that night. What is night? That is Leil. When does night come? When does darkness come? That comes after the sunset and after the twilight mixture. The sunset has passed at this point. The twilight mixture has passed. It is now darkness. Is it a new day? Did the sunset change the day? Yes, Saul had corrected the actions of eating blood by the famished warriors. Have you also noticed the extreme accurate acclamation of specific time? It was now the night season, and the sunset had passed. The Hebrew warriors were slaughtering animals and eating the flesh with the blood out of sheer ravishing hunger. And Saul's corrective action? Note where it is. The chart is here so we can see a visual when the time frame of this is. It is the night season. Let's read it. Each one bring his ox near to me, and each one his sheep, and you shall slaughter them here and eat. And do not sin against Yahuah by eating with the blood. So every one of the people brought his ox with him that night and slaughtered it here. Becomes quite clear it's after the sunset. Again, was this the next day? Did the sunset change the day? 1 Samuel 14:36. And Shaul said, let us go down after the Philistines by night and plunder them until the morning light, and not leave a man of them. And they said, do whatever seems good to you. But the priest said, let us draw near to Elohim here. And Shaul asked of Elohim, should I go down after the Philistines? Do you give them into the hand of Israel? But he did not answer him that day. Another clue, another confirmation. Yom, a single cycle. What happened to the sunset changing the day? Was it a new day? Yom, a singular cycle. What happens to sunset theory? Saul wanted to continue pursuing the Philistines that night, 1 Samuel 14:37. And Shaul asked of Elohim, should I go down after the Philistines? Do you give them into the hand of Israel? But he did not answer him that day. Again, was this then the second cycle of the war? Had sunset changed the day? And yes, I use the word day specifically here for a reason. Did the sunset facilitate the next day of the week? Yahuah did not answer Saul. Saul knew very well that something more was wrong. 1 Samuel 14:38. And Shaul said, come over here, all you chiefs of the people, and know and see what this sin is, or what this sin was. When? Today. Does it seem that Saul knew about the creation account of dawn to dawn? Or did the sunset change the day? This is confirmation number 6 of a single 24-hour period in this word yom, not plural. Then Saul, not knowing the depth of what he was about to say, voiced out the death sentence that landed on Jonathan's neck. 1 Samuel 14:39. For as Yahuah lives, who saves Yisrael, though it be in Jonathan my son, he shall certainly die. But not one among all the people answered him. I ask you, in this verse, what words are there where Saul gave credit to Yahuah? Did we notice that clue in this verse? Saul said, For as Yahuah lives, who saves Yisrael. Need to note that. Let's go to the chart. That night season, this is when it was being spoken. For as Yahuah lives, who saves Yisrael, though it be in Jonathan my son, he shall certainly die. Again, this is after the sunset, just so we're very clear on that. Suddenly, time becomes a life and death situation. How can time be life and death? Well, it is for Jonathan. What about that sunset? What about the evening? They were not to eat food until this point. How can time become a life and death situation? Is this light season, this today, is it actually the tomorrow? Did the sunset change the day? Did Saul make a mistake? Did Saul actually want to say tomorrow? Yahuah previously did not answer Saul's inquiries. Why would Yahuah answer Saul now? Did you notice in the last verse that Saul gave full credit to Yahuah for saving the Israelite nation? Let's read it. For as Yahuah lives, who saves Yisrael. See, Saul did give credit to Yahuah for saving Yisrael. Can we find a lesson here somewhere? This event is about to get extremely serious. 1 Samuel 14:41. Then Saul said to Yahuah, Elohim of Yisrael, give a perfect lot. And Saul and Jonathan were taken, but the people escaped. Verse 42. And Saul said, cast lots between my son Jonathan and me. And Jonathan was taken. Recall the death sentence. Does Jonathan have a death sentence on his head for eating honey? Okay, we now know the impending result of Saul's foolishness. According to his declaration, Jonathan must die. Because of the reason for this study, we must continue with the charts to make certain we know the time span covered thus far. The questions are, did the sunset change the cycle of the week? What will the belief structure of the Hebrew warriors in the heat of battle indicate in terms of Torah? Just a little side note, did you notice it didn't say the Jewish warriors? They are the Hebrew warriors. Just a little clarity there. We need to understand that. Will the words of the Hebrew warriors elevate and glorify dawn, start of the day? Or will they confirm sunset as the time to change the cycle of the week and allow Jonathan to die? What does today, Yom, within that night, have to do with saving Jonathan's life? What does this have to do with time? 1 Samuel 14:43. Saul then said to Jonathan, explain to me what you have done. And Jonathan explained to him and said, I only tasted a little honey with the end of the rod that was in my hand. See, let me die. And Saul answered, Elohim do so and more also, for you shall certainly die, Jonathan. Pretty serious sentence there. Back to the charts. In the previous light season, and Jonathan explained to him and said, I only tasted a little honey. Here's the light season of the oath. Do not eat food until evening, after the sunset. What about today? This is where things were being spoken in the night season. Is it the same as this light season? Or did the sunset change it to a new day? Tasting honey before the sunset. What if he ate honey after the sunset? Again, that night season. 1 Samuel 14:44. And Shaul answered Elohim, do so and more also, for you shall certainly die, Jonathan. Spoken right here in the night season, the death sentence at night. Jonathan, was he to die today? Is it not a new day according to sunset? Was Jonathan sentenced to death today? 1 Samuel 14:45. But the people said to Shaul, should Jonathan die, who has wrought this great deliverance in Israel? Far be it. As Yahuah lives, let not one hair of his head fall to the ground. Note, there is more to that verse, but we're going to look at it a little bit closer first. What great deliverance had Jonathan performed? Was that great deliverance executed on the morning of the yesterday, Timol? Or was it on yesterday, Emesh? Or was the deliverance on yesterday, Etzmol? When was it? The time frame. The time frame of this being spoken was after the sun had set. That first battle, which is referenced by the Hebrew warriors and fought first by Yahuah, then Jonathan and his armor bearer, in the early portion of the light season, was it yesterday, Timol? Was it yesterday, Emesh? Was it yesterday, Ethmol? How did the Hebrew warriors reference it? And I brought those three words up there specifically, because if it was yesterday, one of those three words must be used. What word did the Hebrew warriors use when they identified when that first initial battle by Jonathan and his armor bearer happened? What word did they use? Which yesterday was it, according to the Hebrew words? Or, better yet, was it on a yesterday at all? When was this great deliverance as spoken into by the Hebrew warriors, who now had filled their tummies in the present night season? This is when they were speaking. Did they say that battle was yesterday? The covenanted Yom, 24 hours, Yom from creation. Was it dawn to dawn or was it sunset to sunset? Let's look at it. Just after dawn, sometime in the morning, Jonathan and his armor bearer exterminated 20 men on this early morning. The battle continued through the light season. Jonathan ate honey late in the light season, and it was this light season where the oath was, do not eat food until evening. That was Saul's command. Was it yesterday? They were speaking over here. They were talking over here. Was this before the sunset? This yesterday? What day starts, or what starts the day or the cycle of Yahuah in his kingdom? Again, the two covenants of Yom. That night, this is when it was spoken, that night, after the sun had set, lots were drawn. Jonathan was sentenced to death. Death or life, which is it? Time is crucial here. This is the light season. Sorry, this is the night season that it was being spoken. Is this today or is it yesterday? What is it? We need to discern this. What did the Hebrew warriors have to say? Remember, these men were in the heat of battle, and their minds were concentrating on the battle. What did they have to say about the time frame of the first battle? Again, the two covenants of Yom. The Hebrew warriors cited the great deliverance performed by Jonathan the morning prior to that night season. They commanded that Jonathan was to live today. That word today is not yesterday. This is the Hebrew warriors' declaration. What Hebrew word did they use? What did the Hebrew warriors have to declare about the sunset changing the cycles of the week? Again, the Hebrew warriors declare Yom. This is the light season over here. The first battle was over here. The battle of deliverance after dawn. That is where Jonathan and his armor bearer were fully committed. Yahuah was with them, and they destroyed the initial people, the initial warriors against them. 1 Samuel 14:45. Let's look at this carefully. Please read these last words carefully. As Yahuah lives, let not one hair of his head fall to the ground. Speaking of Jonathan. For he has wrought with Elohim when? This day. That is Yom. This day, that is dawn to dawn. They knew very well that the sunset did not change a day of any kind in Yahuah's kingdom. Remember, Yahuah does not change. If it didn't change back then, why would it change today? This here is the night season of Saul's shame. Again, the two covenants of Yom. In this very night season, the Hebrew warriors identified Jonathan's early morning battle as one and the same Yom, a singular cycle. They knew sunset never changed any cycle of the week. Dawn to dawn. Yes, the Hebrew warriors understood the creation account. It is the night season over here. Jonathan lives today, Yom. Dawn over here to dawn over here. The sunset just brings in the twilight. That's all. It does not change the cycles of the week. Never has, never will. Let's read this just one more time so we can get it all in one verse and understand it. But the people said to Saul, should Jonathan die, who has wrought this great deliverance in Israel? Far be it, as Yahuah lives, let not one hair of his head fall to the ground, for he has wrought with Elohim this day. Thus the people delivered Jonathan, and he did not die. Again, dawn to dawn. This day, Yom, was not yesterday. The sunset never changes the cycles of the week. Never. Never has, never will. What about these definitions of yesterday? This one for Temol, especially yesterday or the day before yesterday. Time past. Yesterday or last night. You can go through these definitions. This is not what the Hebrew warriors declared. They declared Yom. This word or these three words were not there. Jonathan's testimony illustrates the sweetness of dawn in more ways than one because he was able to live. And the sweetness of dawn every day of the week, which also applies to every worship statue as well. Why? Because Yahuah does not change. We read about that in Malachi 3:6. And have a look at Matthew 28:1. At the end of the Shabbat, that is when the dawn arrives. This is in the time when Yahushua was on this earth. Dawn to dawn. Always and forever in Yahuah's kingdom. All of nature waits for dawn to begin a new day. How about you? When does your day begin? More importantly, when does your Shabbat begin? If you enjoyed this study today, please join us live each week and sign up with Covenant Calendar Club for the Friday and Shabbat Zoom meetings, including a live discussion where you'll hear lots of questions and hopefully you'll get many answers. And if you look down there, there's the address where you can sign up and join us live. If you need assistance with this information or have questions, please send your questions to questions@studythecalendar.com to either myself or Charlene. And I thank you very much for giving us your time today on your special Shabbat. And I say shalom to you. Thank you.